These allegations are credible. They are numerous. I've heard these women's testimony, and many of them are heartbreaking. And President Trump should resign his position.
Welcome back to AM Joy. After leading the charge in forcing out a fellow Democrat, Minnesota Senator Al Franken, amid allegations of sexual misconduct and saying that Bill Clinton should have resigned the presidency in light of the Monica Lewinsky affair, New York Senator Gillibrand faced questions about whether she would also take aim at the man currently in the White House. That answer came on Monday when Senator Gillibrand did, in fact, call on Trump to resign, making her the fourth senator to do so after Senators Merkley, Booker, and Sanders. Donald Trump could have tweeted about any of them, but he chose to go after Gillibrand, tweeting, "Lightweight Senator Gillibrand, a total flunky for Chuck Schumer and someone who would come to my office begging for campaign contributions not so long ago and would do anything for them, is now in the ring fighting against Trump. Very disloyal to Bill and crooked-used!" Exclamation point. Many Democrats and Gillibrand herself saw that tweet for what it was, a demeaning and sexist smear aimed at a United States senator. Gillibrand responded on the Today Show on Wednesday.
Let me be blunt about it. Did you interpret that tweet as a sexual reference, that you would trade sexual favors for campaign cash? Is that what the president was saying about you?
Well, certainly that's how I and many people read it, and it was certainly just a sexist smear intended to silence me, and I'm not going to be silenced on this issue.
The accusations against Donald Trump are now finally back in the spotlight, and this time there's a growing movement to finally hold him accountable. #Trump2. Joining me now is Joan Walsh of The Nation and Richard Painter, former chief ethics lawyer under President George W. Bush, and back with me, political analyst Karen Finney. Joan, you know, that attack on Gillibrand was so gross that it's hard to believe that a grown man would tweet that, would write that down and hit send, right?
Such a pig.
But it did, of course, highlight, number one, Trump's tendency to go after only women, because 3 men had called for him to resign first. But in the end, does it wind up boosting, quite frankly, Gillibrand and her sort of national prominence and presidential prospects?
I think it did. I think it helped her out a lot, because you and I both know, Joy, that when she called for Senator Franken to resign, I don't think that she necessarily led the movement, but she was the first on that day when I think the 7th allegation came out, and suddenly it was like dominoes. People were, all day long, people were calling for him to leave. And a lot of, even though I kind of reluctantly joined that call, very reluctantly, a lot of Democrats were mad at me and at Senator Gillibrand for seeming to force the hand of this great senator. There are so many Democrats who are so sick of the Democratic Party not standing up and fighting and being baited into doing things like tossing their members under the bus. That I think she was in a lot of hot water. And the president, even though he didn't intend to, and even though it was sexist and disgusting, I think he helped her out. People aren't talking about that quite as much.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but she also, the things she said about Bill Clinton drew a very sharp rebuke from Philippe Reines, who is a longtime aide to the Clintons, who had a lot to say about what she said about Bill Clinton and was not happy about it. And it did seem to dent her with Clinton Democrats. And I want to go back to the Franken issue, because Richard Painter, you've been among those, and you're a constituent of Senator Franken, who have been saying that it is unfair that Franken was forced out before he got his ethics, his day in court, as it were, in the ethics investigation. This was what Senator Franken said himself in the speech where he announced his resignation.
I, of all people, am aware that there is some irony in the fact that I am leaving while a man who has bragged on tape about his history of sexual assault sits in the Oval Office, and a man who has repeatedly preyed on young girls campaigns for the Senate with the full support of his party. And
of course, that latter part, of course, referring to Roy Moore. Are you of the opinion, Richard Painter, that if Al Franken was forced to step down, in part because of Senator Gillibrand and other Democratic women and Senate women saying he had to go, that if he has to go, that Donald Trump should also have to face the same consequences?
Well, I think there are other reasons why I think President Trump needs to resign or be impeached immediately. On this issue, I disagreed with Senator Gillibrand and others who called for Senator Franken to resign. I believe we need a due process. We need to find out what happened. We need to find out the Roger Stone connection, the Fox connection. There are a lot of things that are very suspicious about what happened with Al Franken, and I don't think the party bosses should be throwing out a senator. I think it's properly handled these types of allegations through an investigation where we find out the facts. But I have to say that even though I disagree with Senator Gillibrand on that, and I strongly disagree with her about Bill Clinton, I think the American people made that very clear in retaliating against the Republicans in the 1998 elections. Even though I disagree, I think it's disgusting that the President of the United States refers to a senator as a whore on Twitter and another senator as Pocahontas and continues to attack Hillary Clinton, calling her crooked Hillary over and over again. He is psychologically deranged, and I think they seriously need to think about removing him under the 25th Amendment to the Constitution if they don't choose to impeach him.
And, and Karen, there are not a few Democrats who feel that way, and Richard Painter's a Republican. But if you look at the Senate Democrats who have now called on Trump to resign, they include Kamala Harris, potential presidential candidate, Bernie Sanders, potential presidential candidate, Mazie Hirono, Jeff Merkley, who people have talked about maybe running, Ron Wyden, Cory Booker, potential presidential candidate, and Kirsten Gillibrand, potential presidential candidate. Not to seem cynical about it, but as a matter of politics, at this stage, having taken the stand that a lot of Democrats did against Senator Franken, isn't this now the default position of anyone who wants to run for president, that Donald Trump must go on these same charges?
That may be the case, but you know what, Joy? This is why I think we have to elevate this conversation, and I think Kirsten tried to do that, which is to say, and I agree, and I know Joan was, we talked about this around Al Franken. I actually wasn't for just ousting Franken without a process. I personally believe that certainly when it comes to Congress, as it should be, everywhere, there should be a set standard of conduct and a set process by which to enforce that standard, period. And so I, as much as I hate to say it, I would afford that same process to the President of the United States. But I think there's two things we need to be concerned about. I think, A, we're going to lose in this very important, we need this to not just be a moment. This needs to be a real reckoning. And the only way it becomes a reckoning is if we take it out of politics and we take it for what it is, which is a test of the character and the conscience of this country. And the only way we do that is if we stay consistent about, what it is that should be happening, whether you're a member of Congress or you're a CEO or you are you are Harvey Weinstein, regardless of who you are, there should be, a certain, there are codes of standards, but then a process. And look, I think in the instance of someone like Harvey, he stepped down because there was plenty of evidence mounting and they knew that it was time. So I'm not comfortable with just people saying, this sort of calling for people to step down and then having them step down unless there is irrefutable evidence out in the public. I think there should still be a process. But you're right. I mean, and I think that is the danger in this moment, that it becomes political when it needs to be so much more than this. I mean, think about the message, just as a final thought, that the defeat of Roy Moore sent to young girls around this country, certainly in Alabama. Your voices matter. When you speak up, it matters. It may have to be years later, and I hope that for any young girl watching this for whom, who may be being abused, or or any woman, frankly, I hope they believe now they can come forward and be believed, and that there will be a fair process by which they'll be believed. Because that's got to be what this is about.
And to that same point, Joan, this is Kirsten Gillibrand sort of talking about, the question of with Donald Trump's accusers, who many of them made these allegations during the campaign, why things are different now. This is Kirsten Gillibrand.
Some of the accusers of President Trump have come forward again recently, this week, publicly, because obviously they came out before the election and he was still elected, and the White House points to that a lot. Do you think times have changed in a year such that these accusations will be listened to in a different way now?
Yes, I do. I think this is a moment in time unlike any other. With the Me Too movement, women are feeling the ability to tell what happened to them, some of the worst moments they've lived, and tell it publicly. And that is powerful, and it is affecting everything, and people are looking for justice.
And I should make the point that Kirsten Gillibrand didn't just come to this issue. I mean, she's been very, forward-leaning on the issue of sexual assault in the military as well.
Yeah.
It's been one of her really signature issues. But on the question of what the public thinks about Donald Trump and the allegations against him, which have not manifested themselves in any consequences yet, 53% of people recently polled by public policy polling say he should resign over what these allegations, and 53% believe the women.
Well, I have to say, on the day that Senator Franken announced his resignation, I wrote in The Nation that it should trigger an investigation of Donald Trump. Not necessarily that he should just be asked to resign, which he should for lots of reasons, but I really thought that the Democrats were missing an opportunity to bring this back, and that part of the reason that people were so angry about what was done to Senator Franken, and I've never been more ambivalent about a political decision in my life than kind of coming down belatedly on the side, I think he's got to go. Anyway, but I used the Trump 2 hashtag on that day, and we've seen it take off because that is the right call, and Democrats cannot unilaterally disarm on this question. You and I talked about this 2 or 3 weeks ago, that they were being set up, and that if Al Franken resigned, their default was going to be, well, he admitted something. He resigned. He's guilty. Donald Trump has admitted nothing. He's innocent. And we can't fall for that again and again. So I thought that the trade-off had to be that they start some kind of investigative process. They can't do that much as a minority, but they can call for it. And we're really starting to hear that drumbeat. And I think it's making a lot of women and men happier with the situation now. They seem like they have a spine. And they understand that the Me Too movement in some ways was ignited by the sight of this serial abuser predator going into the Oval Office and defeating an incredibly talented woman to do so.
And continuing to make gross, sexist, misogynist references to women while he's there. Thank you, Joan Walsh, Richard Painter, and Karen Finney. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Wish we had more time. Coming up, Donald Trump is making grave decisions about the water you drink and the air you breathe. That's next.